Man, what would you do if you found a baby? A long time ago, in a little forgotten village, there lived a woodcutter alone in a tiny wooden house on the outskirts of town. From there he made trips to the big town to sell firewood. He had no wife, no children, not even a dog, just his axe, a machete, two skinny donkeys, and a whole lot of silence. Every day he did the same thing. He got up before the roosters crowed, warmed up some weak coffee, broke off a piece of hard bread and slipped it into his pocket. "All right, body," he would say, "today we're going to make firewood again." He slung the rope over his shoulder, grabbed the axe, and went into the forest. He walked looking for dry trees, cut them, tied them up, carried them, gathered firewood for weeks, stacked it at his house, and when he had enough, he loaded the donkeys and made the trip to the big town to sell it. It was hard work, the kind that bends your back, but he liked it. The sweat made him feel that he was still alive. One morning the sky was gray and the forest was damp. The woodcutter moved between the trees, whistling softly, when suddenly he stopped cold. Something cut through the silence. It was a cry, a small, broken cry. The woodcutter frowned. "What was that?" he whispered. He stood still, listening. The cry came again, a little clearer. "No, that's a child," he said very softly. A shiver ran up his spine. His heart began to pound. Suddenly, the forest no longer felt friendly. He took a few steps first slowly, then faster, following the sound. "Hello," he shouted. "Who's there? Who's crying?" No one answered, only the echo of his own voice and the crying. Getting closer, he pushed aside some branches and then he saw it. There, beside the dirt path, on some dry leaves, there was a bundle, an old, slightly dirty blanket barely moving. The woodcutter swallowed hard. He approached carefully, bent down trembling, and lifted the blanket. It was a very small baby, his face red from crying so much his little fists clenched. "Oh God," he blurted out. The baby looked at him for a second and let out an even louder cry. The woodcutter turned around, looking for someone. "Hey," he shouted into the forest. "Who left this child here?" Silence. "Is anyone there?" he shouted again, his voice now tinged with fear. "Nothing. Just the crunch of leaves and a distant bird." He hesitated, but he couldn't bring himself to leave the baby alone on the ground. He picked him up and kept calling out, "Neighbor, madam, anyone, there's a baby here." He searched for a long time, carrying the child, turning in every direction, his throat dry from shouting. He looked at the baby, who kept crying, but he didn't let go of him for even a second. No one came. In the end he stood there, not knowing what to do. He scratched his head, looked at his dirt-covered hands, then looked up at the sky. "I cut firewood," he muttered. "I don't raise children. What am I supposed to do now?" He adjusted the baby in his arms. The child was light, but the weight he felt in his chest was enormous. "Shh. It's okay," he said awkwardly. "Don't cry, because if you cry more, I'm going to feel like crying too." For a few seconds the baby calmed down, as if the woodcutter's rough voice intrigued him. He stared at him with those big eyes that understood nothing, then started to whimper again. The woodcutter sighed deeply. "If I leave you here, you'll die," he said softly. "But if I take you with me, what am I going to feed you?" He looked toward the path back to his little house. He looked at the forest, which seemed to pretend it knew nothing. There was no answer anywhere. "Well," he finally said, half resigned, half stubborn, "if God put you at my feet, it must be for a reason." He tied up the small bundle of firewood he had managed to cut, loaded it onto his back as best he could, and with the baby in his arms, started walking back toward town. His legs trembled, not from exhaustion, but from fear of what was coming. As he walked, he grumbled, "Just look at the mess I'd gotten myself into when I was so peaceful with my trees." The woodcutter arrived in town, walking slowly with the baby in his arms and the firewood on his back, as if he were carrying the weight of the whole world. When people saw him, some stared with their mouths open, and that baby asked a neighbor, her hands still covered in flour. "I found him abandoned in the forest," the woodcutter replied, half embarrassed, as if he'd been caught doing something wrong. Several people gathered around the baby, started crying again, and the woodcutter desperately rocked him clumsily. "Who would leave a child like that?" said an old man, frowning. "If I knew, I wouldn't be here sweating with fear," the woodcutter muttered. The neighbors began talking among themselves that they should look for the mother, that it was dangerous, that strange things had been happening in the forest lately. Right away, a couple of men said they would check the surrounding area and come back later if they found any traces No one had a clear answer. In the end, someone suggested talking to the village authority. The woodcutter went to that man's house, carrying the baby, who was getting more and more restless. He knocked on the door and waited when they opened. He explained everything from the crying to the blanket on the ground. The authority listened in silence. Without interrupting, after a long moment he sighed. Look, we don't have laws for these things here. We're few people. What we do is wait a few days, ask around the nearby ranches, and see if anyone claims him. If no one shows up, then we all decide who can take care of him. And if you want to try, then you. The woodcutter panicked. Me. But I barely know how to take care of myself. What am I going to do with such a small child? The town will help you, the authority replied, and the child needs a home. This isn't official business. It's just what we do here so we don't leave anyone abandoned. That day the neighbors brought what they could. A cup of warm milk, some bread, a couple of old blankets so the baby wouldn't be cold. The woodcutter watched all of it with a mix of gratitude and fear. Well, thank you, but I don't know if I can. He kept repeating. No one knows, an old woman told him, touching his shoulder. You learn. After eating a little and drinking milk, the baby fell asleep. The woodcutter looked at him awkwardly and said that for now he would take care of him while the town searched the area. If no one appeared, then he would see what to do. That night, in his small house, the baby cried every 2 hours. The woodcutter, used to absolute silence, woke up startled, tripped over his own feet, made clumsy noises while trying to rock the little one. Oh no. You again, please sleep. I have to cut firewood tomorrow, he said. Sometimes he laughed from sheer exhaustion. Other times he clenched his jaw because he didn't understand what the baby wanted. Are you hungry, cold, or are you just messing with me? But in the middle of all that nighttime chaos, there were small moments. Sometimes the baby, tired of crying, rested his head on the woodcutter's chest, and the man felt the breathing slow down. And then, without meaning to, he smiled. Ah, like this. Yes, he whispered, trying not to wake the baby. Like this you almost look like an angel. The days passed. The neighbors who had gone searching found no trace of the mother. No one came looking for the child. The woodcutter got used to carrying the little one on his chest. Held by a blanket tied around him, on his back, he carried the firewood. Look at him, people said. He doesn't cut firewood alone anymore. Now he cuts firewood with a child. The woodcutter grumbled, but he couldn't stop a smile from slipping out. Every morning, before entering the forest, he still shouted, "Hey, I found a baby. Does he belong to anyone?" No one answered. The child grew quickly. He cried less. Sometimes he pointed at things, babbled, pulled on the woodcutter's mustache. "Hey, don't pull that out, Bo," the man said while the child burst into laughter. Yes, it was hard. The work was double, the exhaustion triple. But the woodcutter's heart was starting to soften, and although he never said it out loud, there were nights when he watched the child sleep and murmured, maybe I'm not as alone as I thought. Still, there was an unsettling truth without an answer. Where had the child come from, and who was his mother? That question, sooner or later, would have to find a voice in the forest, and the woodcutter, without knowing it, was about to hear it. Time kept moving forward, as it always does. Slowly, but never stopping. The child stopped being just a cry. He learned to walk, to stumble, to get back up. And the woodcutter, well, he had already accepted that he had company, but there was something that still felt heavy, like a thorn buried deep. Who was the child's mother? Where was she? Why was no one looking for her? One day, while they were cutting firewood, the child sitting on a rock playing with a stick, 2 men appeared who were also gathering wood. The woodcutter raised his hand in greeting. "Good day. Good day." One of them replied, "Is that little one yours?" The woodcutter adjusted the axe on his shoulder. "Seems like it, but I found him abandoned in the forest months ago." The men looked at each other, surprised. One frowned. "Where did you find him?" The woodcutter pointed down the path. "Right around here." He was crying like his soul was breaking. One of the men clicked his tongue. "You know, a young woman used to come this way. She was alone, always carrying a blanket, didn't talk much, quiet." The woodcutter's heart jumped. "A young woman?" "Yes," the other said. "Could she have fallen down there? There's a dangerous cliff full of cracks. Someone can disappear without anyone seeing." The woodcutter dropped the axe. "No. I searched, I shouted for days." One of the men pulled out a rope. "Let's check. We lose nothing." The woodcutter looked at the child. "Let's go." They walked slowly, in silence. They reached the edge of the cliff. The wind blew cold. One man went down, then the other. The woodcutter waited above, still, his heart pounding in his chest. Long minutes passed. Very long minutes. Here's someone. The woodcutter covered his mouth with his hand. It's a woman. She's in a deep crevice. That's why no one saw her before. Silence fell, heavy. It was his mother, right? It seems so. If you hadn't heard the child, he wouldn't have survived. The woodcutter clenched his fist. Poor woman. She died alone. He didn't blame himself for long. He had done what he could. The man dug right there and buried her with respect. The woodcutter closed his eyes. Rest. I'll take care of your son. From that day on, something changed. He stopped asking. He stopped waiting. Now he walked into the forest with the child holding his hand. He still grumbled, but it was different. Firmer, more like a father. The years passed quietly. They built a small ranch. They worked together. The boy learned to cut firewood, to plant, to laugh. He called him father, and that was enough. He never told him the whole truth. He only said, "Your mother was good. She left when you were very small, but since then, you and I have kept each other company." And so they lived, not rich, but complete. A man who found a child and, without looking for it, found a home, built not only of wood, but of heart. Remember this. No one comes into your life by accident. Sometimes God gives you burdens that are really gifts in disguise. As Scripture says, carry each other's burdens. Galatians 6:2. Do it, and don't make excuses.